As you can see, Satan has been given unprecedented access to the lives and souls of mankind
across this entire earth. Called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world.
But their schemes and sorceries are in vain. I'm broken, but I'm not hopeless.
Their plans will ultimately be used to fulfill God's divine, sovereign, and righteous judgment of the nations.
For we wrestle not against flesh and blood,
and the blessed redemption of his set-apart children. One touch.
Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast. For behold, the Lord cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain.
Faith and the commandments are a beautiful refuge.
I just wanna float free.
Izu police say they found him near the corner of 5th and Meade Streets. He was holding a machete and had cut himself and then scrawled messages on different surfaces with his blood. He had written "All Hail Lucifer" and drawn triangles and upside-down crosses, all messages that appear sadistic and satanic.
A tidal wave of infections sweep across the nation. 27 states are seeing an increase in COVID deaths.
As the coronavirus pandemic continues to claim American lives, experts warn the opioid epidemic is surging too.
More than 450,000 American deaths from opioid addiction.
Back now with a disturbing rise during the pandemic. As many people stay home to stay safe, that can be the worst place to be for victims of domestic violence.
Noticed a disturbing trend, an uptick in the number of domestic violence calls because of restrictions and lockdowns.
Experts say the pandemic is a perfect storm, trapping victims at home with their abuser and limiting opportunities to escape.
Many struggled during the pandemic as more stress is added into everyday lives and isolation. The National Institute of Mental Health reports suicides have been on a slow and steady rise since 1999. Well, this year, the Pentagon is reporting a rise in suicides among our active duty military.
Perfect storm, that is what suicide prevention specialists are calling the coronavirus pandemic.
Suicides make up about 60% of all gun deaths here in Tennessee. With the country in a recession and high unemployment rates.
Program manager Mark Person with the Pima County Health Department says this new spike in suicides was first reported at the start of the pandemic. In this graphic from the health department, you can see the increase in week-to-week numbers from February to March. The sharpest increase was 15 suicides within 14 days.
Officers fighting crime on the streets are often fighting a bigger battle, suicide.
It seems to be running constant that we lose more officers for suicide than we do in line of duty death.
The numbers don't lie, and tonight it's adding up to something we cannot ignore. 148. That's how many people have been murdered in Phoenix in the first 9 months of 2020.
That's more than 2 days, and it's a big increase compared to 2019. So what's behind all this?
Sean, one of 148 Arizonans murdered from January through September, a 44% increase from the first 9 months of 2019. DV homicides have nearly tripled this year and account for roughly 1 out of every 4 murders.
Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird.
There's not a single clear explanation anywhere of why it's happening.
The habitation of devils.
Shalom, family.
Though we're in the season of judgment, we feel good taking shelter under the mercies of the Most High.
We pray you all are doing the same. Behold, there came a certain ruler, and worshipped him, saying, My daughter is even now dead, but come and lay thy hand upon her, and she shall live. And Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. And behold, the woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, if I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole.
One touch.
Yes, one touch.
For we wrestle not against flesh and blood.
It only takes one touch.
Hundreds of Christians taking to the streets, praising, worshiping, and praying for one another. And the results, salvations, healings, and even peace restored to some cities riddled with violence.
A local pastor is back home after spending over a week in isolation at the hospital after contracting the coronavirus. He tells us he prayed in his hospital bed, asking God to give him a second chance.
All praises to the Most High. Are you ready? I hope you're ready.
Belief We're about to go are the indefatigable allies of leadership.
Make sure you're prayed up.
Under darkness.
We're about to go into a dark winter. A dark winter.
Under darkness.
A dark winter. Ruling.
The spiritual war is not
Faith,
over. We're not finished yet.
The world.
Thank you so much. And of course, it's the headquarters of the World Economic Forum, which is celebrating 50 years as its founder. What does that mean to you personally?
It doesn't mean celebrating 50 years of Davos or of our existence. For me, it means to celebrate 50 years of the stakeholder concept, of stakeholder capitalism, because I wrote the book in 1970 and conceptualized, probably for the first time, what we call today stakeholder capitalism. And I wanted to create a place where stakeholders could meet. And that was the original idea of Davos. So I'm very pleased and happy that we are not only celebrating 50 years, but we are celebrating now, finally, that stakeholder capitalism has become or is becoming mainstream.
When we look on the World Economic Forum's website, we see that stakeholder capitalism is one of the main objectives of this Great Reset. At the time of the interview back in January of 2020, the stock market was at all-time highs, and the sense of urgency for a new economic model really wasn't there.
See also, I would call it that we have urgency in emergency related to the environmental issues, climate change, but also biodiversity and so on. We face an emergency situation, and we have not yet really the sense of urgency to address those issues. We see it now with the fires in Australia, and of course it's relatively difficult to get such a sense of urgency if the stock markets are doing so well as we see now.
Now we have economic conditions comparable to that of the Great Depression due to the fallout from the coronavirus lockdowns. And now, lo and behold, we have the justification for the Great Reset and the 50-year-old plan for the new economic system.
È necessario urgente un sistema economico giusto, affidabile e in grado di rispondere alle sfide più radicali che l'umanità e il pianeta si trovano ad affrontare.
We are answering Pope Francis's challenge to create more inclusive economies that spread the benefits of capitalism more equitably and allow individuals to realize their full potential.
A majority of people around the world say that they think their families will be worse off in 5 years. That's a scenario that we simply can't accept.
Too much wealth has accreted to too few people.
If you make money, what's the point if you're not prepared to share it? If the people who help make that wealth for you can't live with dignity.
It's inclusive capitalism, though, and we have to recognize that starting from where we are to where we need to get to, We need to bring everyone along, and there will be adjustments that come with that.
We do need the private sector's ingenuity, capital, technology, people, everything, their passion to come to the party.
We want to operate in a sustainable way, where incentives are aligned across generations, not just across quarters, and the main actors take a long-term perspective.
Aligning our innovation with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the priorities of inclusive capitalism is both a business and sustainability imperative.
Two reasons, I think, why I'd say concrete commitments to inclusive capitalism matter. I mean, the first, and not to be underestimated, really important, is they can inspire other people. And the second thing that I would say around concrete public commitments is they can help build trust.
Leaders in the business community can be a unifying force. They can be a source of opportunity. They can be a source of understanding. So we as business leaders can step up and solve many of these economic problems.
I think business plays a very important role in resolving these challenges. I think businesses have to become, part of the solution through leadership by example and through leadership by incentives.
We are stewards of this earth. It's our duty to keep it clean and to keep it decent for future generations.
I'm wanting to embark on this journey to provide the guidance and the assistance of the church's own social thought and whatever other consideration might be necessary, whether ethical or, just social guidance, so that this group that has taking up such a noble task of making capitalism work for the good of humanity, achieve its goal, and land on target. So this is our vision, this is our purpose.
Look, the fact that different religions need to come together on all matters is just the crying need of the times in our world. Faith cannot be used to pull us apart. Faith is meant to bring us together. And the fact that I'm a Sikh and somebody else is a different religion, to me, doesn't matter.
Our work is indeed about social justice, which is rooted in the gospel. The idea that every person deserves to live in a just society.
Capitalism is at the heart of innovation that creates higher standard of living. And we know that it's been working. Yet we also know we can do a lot better.
We need a new system focused on the well-being of people. It's a big challenge, but if it is done right, the benefits will be immense.
It's not just an asset owner, it's not just an asset manager, it's not just a CEO, it's not just these boards of directors. We have to work collectively over the long term.
What I think capitalism has to stand for to be inclusive capitalism, how we help everybody have equal access to the opportunity, have the economic mobility.
The Council is a terrific body in which we can assemble a critical mass of companies to join and commit to concrete actions that not only affect and improve the communities in which we live, but affect the world community of which we're all a part of.
We believe we need more than 1,000 organizations on board, and only with this very purposeful collective action, we will see the systemic change across markets that will make capitalism truly inclusive.
We invite all businesses, large and small, and individuals to join us as stewards for inclusive capitalism by going to our website, agreeing the principles, and making your own commitments to inclusive capitalism. Please join us. Thank you.
According to the World Economic Forum website, the Great Reset agenda would have three main components. The first would steer markets towards fairer outcomes, aka wealth redistribution through taxation and regulation. The second component of the Great Reset agenda would ensure that investments advance shared goals, such as equality and sustainability. aka there will be global standards regulated by task forces to control every aspect of your life through regulation and ensure compliance to the 2030 Agenda. The third and final priority of the Great Reset Agenda is to harness the innovations of the Fourth Industrial Revolution to support the public good, especially by addressing health and social challenges, aka this is the transhumanist agenda to merge man with machine and enforce compliance with global governance initiatives laid out by the UN's 2030 Agenda. Now, this might be a good time to note that 14 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals include vaccination.
I'm not going to talk about mandatory policy and where I stand on that point. It may well come up later, kind of hoping it does in the questions, because then I'll share with you my rather one-sided opinion on that. So what could be a better return on investment, Rob? What could we invest our resources in if we're not going to tackle hesitancy? If hesitancy is not to blame, how are we going to deal with this in the future? Well, I would argue that now is the time where we need a shift in perspective. Immunization is a best buy. 14 of 17 SDGs are addressed through immunization. And when we talk about universal health coverage, we talk about primary health care, we talk about health security. Without immunization, there's none of that.
Now, I'm going to play a series of clips from a World Economic Forum video published about 3 years ago talking about the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I will be commenting about these clips as we go.
We are wondering what is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change.
Our bodies will be so high-tech we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
This is profound. She said the very idea of human beings being some sort of a natural concept is going to change, and that our bodies are going to be so high-tech we will not be able to distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial. This is the merger of man and machine. This is the transhumanist agenda. This is the World Economic Forum's official video from their own YouTube channel.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans?
The original Industrial Revolution was driven by the discovery that you could use steam engines to do all kinds of interesting things.
But that was followed by additional revolutions for electricity and computers and communications technology. We're now in the early stages of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is bringing together digital, physical, and biological systems.
One of the features of this Fourth Industrial Revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
There you just heard Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman for the World Economic Forum, say that the Fourth Industrial Revolution is going to change us, change humanity.
With the ability to visualize brain activity, for example, through a simple consumer-based EEG device, it gives us access to ourselves in ways that we've never before thought possible. It unlocks the black box that is the brain and enables us to really, truly be able to realize an identity that is aspirational.
There's now a scientific foundation for the effects of mindfulness on the brain, on the genome, on biological aging. And when the human mind does know itself, then you get the potential for a new renaissance that restructures itself in terms of our relationship to life, our relationship to the planet, our relationship to work.
We need a different economic model. And by that, I don't mean capitalism versus communism. What I'm talking about is a shift in the system along the lines of the two big changes that happened in the 20th century, Keynesianism, with a much greater focus on health and education and the role of government working with business, and then a reaction against that in late century to neoliberalism, where the focus was on free markets, freedom of the individual, and getting governments out of the way. We need a shift to a new system that will allow us to meet the basic needs of every human on the planet, that will live within planetary means, that will be fairer, and that will be focused as its key goal not on growth per se, but on maximizing human well-being. And history tells us that a values shift is triggered by creation of a new story about how we want to live.
They were talking about this new economic model not being based on hard work or being a business owner or creating wealth and success. They were talking about a new global economic order that will be fairer, they say, and essentially redistribute wealth, your wealth, as they see fit to lower the standards where you are in your countries or in some countries and raise them in others.
So the goal is no longer, I want to be less bad, less monotonous, less unsafe, less unjust. It's really about a diverse, safe, healthy, and just world with clean air, clean water, clean soil, clean energy.
Together we are fighting to preserve our fragile climate from irreversible damage and devastation of unthinkable proportions.
Are you beginning to see how this COVID crisis has accelerated the 2030 agenda and global governance? And how they use public figures such as celebrities to help sell it to the public because people do not trust governments and institutions. Now, of course, the Fourth Industrial Revolution will be sold to humanity as a way to better mankind, a word which they don't want you to use. Mankind, the UN doesn't like that. They want humankind, right? Anyways, they will make paralyzed people walk again. They will help the blind to see. And while this is all amazing and great, history shows us that time and time again, things that could be used to benefit humanity are often weaponized and turned against humanity.
Humans have always been using tools, but because of the recent advances in technology, we're beginning to have machines that can augment us in all sorts of interesting ways.
I was the first person in the world to be able to voluntarily move my legs while stepping in a robot by exciting the nervous system using electrical stimulators directly onto the spine. We believe that a cure will be possible if enough of the right people have the will to fast-track a cure for paralysis.
The projection of 5 million jobs lost by 2020 to technology is serious, but it's not the main question. Construction, manufacturing, services, public health and education, these industries will still exist. The main question is, what will be the future of work? How will we define work? How will we share the wealth?
One of the things that I think is so essential to free and open societies is freedom of thought. And up until now, the conversation we've been having is around freedom of speech. Once we can access people's thoughts and access people's emotions, we have to create a space that enables people to think freely, to think divergent thoughts, to think creative thoughts. And in a society where people fear having those thoughts, the likelihood of being able to enjoy progress is significantly diminished.
Did you just hear that? She said right now the discussion has been around free speech, but basically once we get that out of the way, once we get access to people's thoughts and once we get access to people's emotions, we need to create a framework for people to think in so people aren't scared and so people are safe. This is absolutely terrifying. Talk about thought police. They are fully intending and telling us right now that they plan to have direct access to your thoughts and to your emotions and be able to manipulate them as they see fit, of course, for the greater good.
We need to take responsibility at every level of society, from the individual and the personal to the institutional to the global, to adapt to these technological challenges and changes which are redefining what it means to be human, what it means to work, what it means to be completely embedded in this world.
They're putting in the 5G systems that literally will slowly kill our humanity while they control us as biological androids. They now say we're going to merge the machines. They now say that we are the robots.
Teleoperation allows a human to provide guidance to the robot to move in a way that we find good. Now let's say I'm a human pilot, Wizard of Ozing the robot. If I wanted to pick something up from the table as a robot, my teleoperator would look down, look at the field of view, look up, look at their hand, move it over, feel the tactile sensors in the hand, close the hand on the object and pick it up. So having something that's a human makes that a lot easier.
Because of my responsibilities in surveillance as a otherwise normal security specialist, I was showed this technology at work. And it was through the perspective, of course, of the camera, and what I was told that it was obvious it was being used through the eyes of the target. So I have seen it, and it is absolutely remarkable. It's just like a first-person, video game or something where you see right through the eyes of the individual.
Now let's say I'm a human pilot, Wizard of Ozing the robot. I could have an overlay that says this person is distressed or lying or otherwise some kind of useful information that I might not be able to tell, augmented from the machine. So if I was a robot, stood up on stage, and my teleoperating pilot did this, my robot would do that, and now I can look over there, and now I can look over there. The teleoperation is a superpower in helping robots learn.
In fact, the very nature of the research and development program that is going on in Seattle, Washington, and I think by extension what's being done to TIs around the country is very largely geared towards the monitoring of human beings for the specific purpose of recording every aspect of human existence, to monitor our thoughts and to monitor our emotions and our feelings, to inform computer software that is used on robots, that is used on computers themselves, to make them as human-like as possible.
And obviously, computers are better at things than people in lots of different ways. So now imagine, not only can they do everything that a human can do, but they can do everything that the best human at any task could do better than them.
In 2003, they launched what's called the AI system, which is a intelligent supercomputer with the intelligence of a human being, in other words, a smart human being, but able to think 10 trillion times faster, with the access to all known knowledge and history, and a complete access to the internet and all of the communication pathway.
So you're dealing with a system of remote neural networks. That's what's targeting you, okay? Remote neural networks, okay, with a will, intellect, and emotion of their own.
Integrated into a package that consolidates them in human form. So everything that's ever been built in the history of AI, you can pack into one of these machines and give that capability to a human-like robot. So there's the form factor doesn't limit you in using these things. You can still use all of the techniques of modern AI. So if I was a robot, stood up on stage, and my teleoperating pilot did this, my robot would do that, and now I can look over there, and now I can look over there.
As far as I'm aware, it's real time. There may be a second or two delay, but it is as it is happening. They can actually see through the eyes of the target. It's done all remotely. And that is rendered, of course, in essentially real time on a computer screen. And then it is to the point where it's so accurate, you can actually see the individual pores on someone's face, see scars and nicks and so forth. And so you can understand how, if you had several people, for example, that you were able to do this, you can see through their eyes in a room or on a street corner or within an office building, wherever it is. You can get total situational awareness simply by looking through their eyes, and you can see through basically it's like being 3 or 4 or 5 different people all at the same time.
The world outside of us is very big. This room, say, is much bigger than my head. But somehow, in some real sense, I have the room inside my head. And it's not just the room, it's the city. And it's not just the city, it's the country. It's not just the country, I can think of the whole planet.
And it's highly, highly valuable for intelligence purposes and military purposes, corporate espionage purposes. And it is amazing the extent to which this technology works. It's so far advanced beyond what most people are aware of. It's truly mind-blowing. And I think that's a big part of educating people, is making them understand that, fortunately or unfortunately, this is possible, and it is being done right now today.
So how is this possible? And what I want to point out is the size. So my head's small. Well, not too small. It's small. Small compared to all that. How is it possible that all that's in here? And what's come to be understood in the cutting edge of modern AI is that there is a really interesting, fascinating answer to this. And it has to do with the fact that the world has patterns, structure. So you may be familiar with fractals. So fractals look very complicated. but they're generated by a tiny little thing that you can write down in a few numbers. And the world is like this. Images, like natural images, like what I'm looking at, have so much structure that they can be shrunk and compressed into a very tiny, what AI people call representation. So what our brains seem to do is build a very, very good compressed representation of the world. Call it a model. So just like if I have a building and there's like a blueprint or a scale model of the building, imagine I have the whole world and all of its concepts, and I shrink it down into this weird compressed representation so that it fits inside my brain.
The exact same thing happens with the computer. The data is sent to the computer, then it is rendered. And from what I understand, that's where this technology is right now. The cutting edge is trying to marry, the software that's used to render it on the computer and the actual detecting of the signal and the hacking of the signal within the human mind.
And of course, part of that program is Obama's BRAIN initiative, a multi-billion-dollar program. DARPA's got a huge chunk of that.
Is there progress in the BRAIN initiative? Is this investment, the public investment, yielding important new insights?
Well, so far it has actually it's resulted in the development of a full brain scale activity map of what goes on in the brain as we do various things, seeing into the brain and for being able to manipulate the activities of the brain and to, in a sense, mimic them and maybe supply them artificially.